Hi there, welcome. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. We're starting a new book in the Book of Mormon as we work our way backwards this time in Ether, starting with Ether 15. I gotta forewarn you, this chapter is pretty gruesome, and the imagery is quite something. So as we read it, I don't think you'll have trouble getting this image in your head, but boy, it is quite disturbing. And so perhaps you might be thinking, or maybe you would like to think, how did this happen? How did they get to this particular state of affairs? All right. Ether is a record of the Jaredites that was, it was preserved, and the people of Limhi found it. And so Moroni, in his last days on the earth, he helped to condense their story and include it as part of the record that he preserved. So what we're getting in Ether is a record of a different people, and the last chapter is of their demise. So here we go, Ether chapter 15. And it came to pass, when Coriantumr had recovered of his wounds, he began to remember the words which Ether had spoken unto him. He saw that there had been slain by the sword already nearly 2 millions of his people, and he began to sorrow in his heart. Yea, there had been slain 2 millions of mighty men, and also their wives and their children. He began to repent of the evil which he had done. He began to remember the words which had been spoken by the mouth of all the prophets, and he saw them that they were fulfilled thus far, every whit, and his soul mourned and refused to be comforted. And it came to pass that he wrote an epistle unto Shiz, desiring him that he would spare the people, and he would give up the kingdom for the sake of the lives of the people. And it came to pass that when Shiz had received his epistle, he wrote an epistle unto Coriantumr, that if he would give himself up, that he might slay him with his own sword, that he would spare the lives of the people. And it came to pass that the people repented not of their iniquity, and the people of Coriantumr were stirred up to anger against the people of Shiz, and the people of Shiz were stirred up to anger against the people of Coriantumr. Wherefore the people of Shiz did give battle unto the people of Coriantumr. And when Coriantumr saw that he was about to fall, he fled again before the people of Shiz. And it came to pass that he came to the waters of Ripliancum, which by interpretation is large, or to exceed all. Wherefore when they came to these waters, they pitched their tents. And Shiz also pitched his tents near unto them. And therefore on the morrow they did come to battle. And it came to pass that they fought an exceedingly sore battle, in which Coriantumr was wounded again, and he fainted with the loss of blood. And it came to pass that the armies of Coriantumr did press upon the armies of Shiz, that they did beat them, that they caused them to flee before them, and they did flee southward, and did pitch their tents in a place which was called Ogath. And it came to pass that the army of Coriantumr did pitch their tents by the hill Ramah, and it was that same hill where my father Mormon did hide up the records unto the Lord which were sacred. And it came to pass that they did gather together all the people upon all the face of the land, who had not been slain, save it was Ether. And it came to pass that Ether did behold all the doings of the people, and he beheld that the people who were for Coriantumr were gathered together to the army of Coriantumr, and the people who were for Shiz were gathered together to the army of Shiz. Wherefore they were for the space of 4 years gathering together the people, that they might get all who were upon the face of the land, and that they might receive all the strength which it was possible that they could receive. And it came to pass that when they were all gathered together, every one to the army which he would, with their wives and their children, both men, women, and children, being armed with weapons of war, having shields and breastplates, and headplates, and being clothed after the manner of war, they did march forth one against another to battle, and they fought all that day, and conquered not. And it came to pass that when it was night, they were weary, and retired to their camps. And after they had retired to their camps, they took up a howling and a lamentation for the loss of the slain of their people. And so great were their cries, their howlings and lamentations, that they did rend the air exceedingly. And it came to pass that on the morrow they did go again to battle, and great and terrible was that day. Nevertheless they conquered not. And when the night came, again they did rend the air with their cries, and their howlings, and their mournings for the loss of the slain of their people. And it came to pass that Coriantumr wrote again an epistle unto Shiz, desiring that he would not come again to battle, but that he would take the kingdom, and spare the lives of the people. But behold, the Spirit of the Lord had ceased striving with them, and Satan had full power over the hearts of the people, for they were given up unto the hardness of their hearts, and the blindness of their minds, that they might be destroyed. Wherefore they went again to battle. And it came to pass that they fought all that day, and when the night came they slept upon their swords. And on the morrow they fought even until the night came. And when the night came they were drunken with anger, even as a man who is drunken with wine, and they slept again upon their swords. And on the morrow they fought again, and when the night came they had all fallen by the sword, save it were 52 of the people of Coriantumr, and 69 of the people of Shiz. And it came to pass that they slept upon their swords that night, and on the morrow they fought again, and they contended in their might with their swords and with their shields all that day. And when the night came, there were 32 of the people of Shiz, and 27 of the people of Coriantumr. And it came to pass that they ate and slept, and prepared for death on the morrow. And they were large and mighty men as to the strength of men. And it came to pass that they fought for the space of 3 hours, and they fainted with the loss of blood. And it came to pass that when the men of Coriantumr had received sufficient strength that they could walk, they were about to flee for their lives. But behold, Shiz arose, and also his men, and he swore in his wrath that he would slay Coriantumr, or he would perish by the sword. Wherefore he did pursue them, and on the morrow he did overtake them, and they fought again with the sword. And it came to pass that when they had all fallen by the sword, save it were Coriantumr and Shiz, behold, Shiz had fainted with the loss of blood. And it came to pass that when Coriantumr had leaned upon his sword, that he rested a little, he smote off the head of Shiz. And it came to pass that after he had smitten off the head of Shiz, that Shiz raised up on his hands and fell, and after that he had struggled for breath, he died. And it came to pass that Coriantumr fell to the earth, and became as if he had no life. And the Lord spake unto Ether, and said unto him, Go forth. And he went forth, and beheld that the words of the Lord had all been fulfilled, and he finished his record, and the 100th part I have not written, and he hid them in a manner that the people of Limhi did find them. Now the last words which are written by Ether are these: Whether the Lord will that I be translated, or that I suffer the will of the Lord in the flesh, it mattereth not, if it so be that I am saved in the kingdom of God. Amen. Well, this is pretty intense. A whole demise, a whole people that hated each other so much that they were willing to kill them all because of their hatred and their anger. As I I contemplate the gravity of this situation. We become in 2012, as we near the end, with wars and rumors of wars all around us, and even movies that we see. We're so almost desensitized to wars and fighting and killing that the gravity of the situation and the reality of it is, sometimes we think it's like a video game or something. And you think, wow, how did this happen? How did they come to this place where here they are, they're not even on a battlefield, but they're having their women and their children also armed with this. And interestingly, this morning I heard on the news that this battle going with Israel and Hamas, that they're shooting their rockets into marketplaces and shooting the rockets into schoolyards, where, I mean, this is such you can see the depravity of mankind when they want to include their women and their children. And when you look at this here, if you look at, there's a lot going on here in this chapter, and I may not have time to give all of the feelings I'm feeling as I am experiencing this chapter, but really it's a travesty. And if it all comes down to verse 19. Verse 19 really kind of encapsulates the whole reason that this exists. This kind of hatred and anger, to the point that they're willing to just kill for hatred. And here's what it says: "But behold, the Spirit of the Lord had ceased striving with them, and Satan had full power over the hearts of the people. For they were given up unto the hardness of their hearts, and the blindness of their minds, that they might be destroyed." This is it right here. You got the Spirit of the Lord and Satan. And when you have the Spirit of the Lord with you, you love. You're full of love. And when you don't, when you have the spirit of Satan with you, you just want to destroy. And it's kind of interesting how it came down to these last two guys, and how graphic is this? That I'm wondering who wrote this down, who saw this, who witnessed this. Was it all revealed, through the prophet? When he says he smote off the head of Shiz, and then here, like a little chicken, when you cut off and it still runs around a little bit, it says after he smote off the head of Shiz, he raised up on his hands and he fell, and then he struggled for breath. I'm picturing a headless person. How do you struggle for breath if you don't have a head? That's kind of an interesting thought. But this coming down to these two people, it's fascinating to me, because I know this is a fiction, but I watched a blockbuster movie this weekend, Skyfall, the James Bond movie, and what a movie it was. It was a wow movie on every level. And even the credits in the beginning was like a whole amazing experience, just the credits. But it comes down to, I don't want to do any spoiler alerts here too, but they're spies. They're these two spies, and it comes down to these two spies. And one of them tells the story that, he was a spy who had gone bad, and then he was still fighting against the other one who was still working, for the good of the country. And he said, "Look at what they've done to us." And he said, it's like they put all these, they've lured all these rats into this big vat or something, and then after they get so hungry, they just started eating each other until there's only two left, and they just, and then, one of them eats the other one, and he's the last one. And then when he gets freed, he doesn't have he has a taste for rats now. And how gross is that? And well, in this movie, with James Bond and this other guy, I forget what they said his name was, but it comes down to where it's just those two, and they're dueling to the death. And the one who is the evil guy, he doesn't even care if he dies himself. He just wants to kill the other one. And you see how this madness that comes when you have this hatred and this anger for doing horrible things. And I know this isn't in the scriptures or something, but there's a scene in there which totally shows the depravity when somebody is of that mindset, where there's this woman who is a complete, she's had nothing to do with their fight, and he puts a shot of, what was it on her head? Bourbon or whiskey or vodka, whatever it was. He puts a shot of that on her head and walks back, and they have a shooting contest to try and get the thing off her head, and using her, as a thing. And you think, oh, who does that? I mean, where there's no value to human life. Well, we see that today in our news. Real news, not in the movies, in the real news. And, I guess until it comes home to you and you see it firsthand, it's like it's not even real to you. And so I guess the caution would be here to look at these people and, why were these records preserved? They're desperately trying to share whoever is going to read their record, how they ended, why they ended, so that as a caution that they don't do the same kinds of things. And to the other part, I think that's significant in this particular chapter, is that he says in verse 33 towards the end, as in the reflection, he tells Ether, the Lord tells Ether, go look. And he looks, and can you imagine the carnage and the everything that he sees all over the land? And he says the words of the Lord had all been fulfilled. And it says 100th part he hasn't written. So imagine, he just couldn't possibly write all the horrible things that there were. But we have just enough to understand kind of what happened. And this is a critical part that I have come to realize, that the words of the Lord through the prophecies, will be fulfilled 100%. And that when we read scriptures, it's like a history book that's backwards, where when a history book is written, they're looking back at things that have happened, but the scriptures and prophecies is like a forward history book. They're telling you of things that they've seen that are to come. And it's 100% certainty that the words of the Lord will be fulfilled. It's not a guess. It's not a prediction. It's a prophecy. And that's what the difference is. And so when we hear about prophecies, when they are really coming through the Lord's prophets, those are things that we need to pay attention to. And also the preparation that we can do as these things come around us. Another interesting preview that I saw in the movie today, which actually just seeing the preview was a huge indicator, to me. There was a remake of a movie called Red Dawn, and these people in the United States were suddenly overtaken by a firestorm of helicopters coming in from another country, and they just came in and they just started killing Americans. And with no warning, they wiped out the electrical grid, and everybody was wiped out with their computers. And all the things that they used that were connected into that were all down. And the only ones that were able to fight back with any kind of strength, because I did see this movie, a few months ago, the older one, was a family who had been prepared. They were what people in today's world would call preppers. And why it has a negative connotation is kind of a mystery, because they're the ones who actually end up, as a shelter and a help for people and fighting the bad people, is that they were prepared. They were prepared with supplies, they were prepared with ammunition, and they were prepared physically, that they were strong enough that they could take on these evil people. And we have been warned, I know I have been warned since the time I was tiny and could even hear the words of a prophet, to have food supply, to have plenty of food supply. Not that, we don't know what's going to happen, but look at what just happened in Hurricane Sandy. Those people were stranded and left out in the freezing cold after they had this big hurricane. Then they had a snowstorm, and many of them perished for the want of food and shelter and clothing. And the ones who you think, why didn't you evacuate? Why did you think that you could weather the storm when they told you it was a horrible place? So being prepared in case of emergencies is not a stupid or wimpy thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. And you can be a blessing to yourself, your family, your neighbors, and complete strangers who are our fellow brothers and sisters. And having this, being able to be self-sustaining and just, to depend on yourself instead of to depend on the government. The government's not going to be there. Everything the government touches is corrupt, and it's full of bureaucracy, and it's full of waste. That's not gonna be there to help you. I've been so frustrated, as I'm sure millions of other people in the country, when the government starts taking over everything and they limit your freedoms and they limit your movement of all the things that you do. And you need to be prepared. I mean, really, when I look at this chapter about all this stuff, how would being prepared change these things? Well, for one thing, if a family was to go into hiding and run away from this kind of war that fell on their doorstep, and they had mobility with backpacks and they could run into more remote places, that they could actually survive and live off the land, live off their supplies, live off their things. Maybe there are some of those people who were able to avoid this kind of a horrible tragedy in the demise of their people. And this is not something, I remember when I was reading these scriptures when I was much younger, and I remember thinking, wow, okay, we've got the large plates and the small plates that these records were translated from. And Nephi tells us that he didn't include the large plates, which was more of the record of the secular dealings of people, maybe political things or events that have happened, but that he preserved the small plates, which for him were only things that dealt with our salvation. These were things of an absolute essential need for our salvation, of a spiritual nature. These are the sacred spiritual records that he preserved to help some future generation, that he said in the Lord's timeline, he preserved these for us. So when I remember reading these chapters on these wars and going, what does this have to do? Why are all these things in here if they're on a spiritual nature? Well, after years of study now, and now I've had experience in life and watching the news and in my own experience, and realizing, wow, everything is spiritual to the Lord. Everything that has, a temporal base to it, a physical, secular, everything is spiritual. Money, physicality, and how you spend your time, all of those things are important to the Lord. And so when you look at war and you look at the causes of war and the purposes and the intent of the people who battle, and I am absolutely not heartbroken, but to watch the difference between the intent of war, people who war, and right now, the biggest war that has just exploded on the scene is between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And they're screaming death, death to the Jews. And there's no middle ground. It's a complete hatred, and they want to get them out. And yet the Israelis have taken, I guess it's been almost 8,000 hits in the last couple years, more than the Germans did back in World War II. And they have a right to defend themselves. So there are some who go on to take over because of their hatred, and then others fight in defense of their homes and their land and their country. And they're like, we don't want to come and occupy things that we're not, that, this is our home. And this is the big difference. People who war because of hatred and anger, and they want to oppress and occupy, and other people who, wait until the defensive just to defend their freedom, their family, their home. This is a huge difference between people who go to battle and go to war about, the intent, and whether you have the Spirit of the Lord or you have the spirit of Satan with you. And a guy called into a radio station this morning who is living in Israel, and the radio host asked him, "Are you afraid?" And he goes, "Well, I would be." He said, "I hear sirens and stuff, and if you drive around, I mean, it's pretty scary." He said, "But I know the Lord is on our side." Wow, how is that for faith, to know that they've been promised the land of, in the land of Israel, that the Lord is on their side. And when you have the Lord on your side, it doesn't mean everything's going to be peachy rosy, but it means, hey, we pretty much know how this is going to end. And whether the numbers don't stack up, you can look back in the Old Testament to see that numbers don't really matter when you have the Lord on your side. Look back through even further back, and you look at Moses and the Egyptians. And when you have the Lord on your side, you have unseen powers in your favor. And when you have faith, as the people of Israel do in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, doesn't mean that they can do nothing and still be saved, but that they have the Lord on their side. And this is a huge distinction. So in this chapter, as we work our way backwards in the Book of Mormon, and it's interesting too, because I kind of got to hear the voice of the person who's reading it, like how I just recounted the story about the Israelis and Palestinians. He did that about the people of Coriantumr versus Shiz, and so you kind of got to hear a little bit of the voice of Moroni too, as he was reading this incredible story and then encapsulating it so that it would be less space on these plates. And here they were preserved for us. 90 seconds. I've got to end here, and I appreciate your time listening, and I hope that you find it of interest and of value, and more than that, I hope that it's provoking to inspire you to live your best life, be faithful, and to choose the Lord's side versus Satan's side, because Satan's side is only there to destroy you. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.